Yeah,
on
so I
there,
asked, and that was at the bottom of the note. There's a hand-scribed note.
That was one of the
I
last
turned to
of
Conrad and says,
9 or
"What's
so threatened
Malachi?"
letters.
and that
He said-
Malaki.
He said, "That's serious." He said, "They won't hesitate to take out your whole neighborhood if necessary to get what they want."
Would that have to do with, what was it, a bus explosion?
He
They were
said
trying to
they
get one
killed all the
guy,
people on the bus to get one man.
and that was connected to the word Malakia.
Right,
Yeah.
and he also
Okay.
brought Wendell a newspaper clipping that showed a helicopter crash that happened within the Area 51
Yeah.
perimeter, and showing that the
He said
three-
one of those men on the helicopter
Three.
was wanted.
three, if I remember right.
What,
There were
three?
several.
Three, yeah, three
Yeah.
of the men on that helicopter were killed in regard to
goodness.
this accidental helicopter
Information
crash.
that they had that they wanted to stop.
All right. And here we come to Robert Lazar, and the nuclear physicist, and his connection to S4, and that's a very controversial case. And according to Bob Lazar, in the conversation that he had with, I believe it was John Lear. Did he speak to John Lear? Or,
Yes, yes.
Bob Lazar, he said that Bob
And George
claimed,
Knapp.
and George Knapp.
was one of the
Yeah.
primary investigators, one of the most accredited journalists in the world. In fact, he just won the Peabody Award for journalism in regard to a water scandal and use of the water system up in Las Vegas, where he works out of KLAS TV.
Yes,
and
Channel
he
8.
broke the story on Bob Lazar.
Yes, and
But
Area 51. He was
John
the-
Lear helped bring that story to George Knapp. Yeah.
Well, according to the reports, Robert Lazar claims that he worked at S4 and that he saw live aliens as well as flying discs there. And I say Lazar, when he contacted KLS TV reporter George Knapp about his story. And in the documentary, you interview John Lear, and John claims that Bob first saw the flying disc that he called, quote, the sport model, which was being tested outside of the S4 installation hangar.
Now, John, let me talk about John
Sure.
Lear for a second. John knows quite a bit. He's the son of the pioneer of Learjet, the
Yes.
founder of the Learjet.
And he's a pilot as well, too.
He-
And
yeah.
his brother invented the Lear continuous tape, cassette tapes.
And he held every pilot's license available through the FAA. There aren't many men like that in the world. He also worked for Air America. He's admitted in the interview to me, we did a 4-hour interview over a whole day's period at John Lear's home back in November of 2009. And during that interview, he admitted that he did work for Air America. So he knows the dirty, dark side of the U.S. government, and he's willing to talk about it. In fact, his investigations right now are centering on 9/11 and the moon. And John Lear is another researcher like Wendell Stevens who really needs to be paid attention to.
Yes,
he has a lot of very important information.
He does. He's got a lot of insider information, and I know that Wendell, to your
Because men
walking encyclopedia.
within the military are willing to come out to certain other men in the military who they respect, who they know are independents.
Yes.
Wendell's an independent. John Lear's an independent.
Yes, and also too, and John Lear says that Lazar talks about specifically 3 projects that are going on at S4. One was Project Galileo, which Lazar was involved in, and that had to do with gravity propulsion.
Yep.
And then there was Project Sidekick, which had to do with neutron beam weapons, and Project Looking Glass, which involved the physics of seeing back in time. And Bob didn't know a lot about those last 2, but he was familiar with the Project Galileo. And he also claims that Bob told him that while at S4 he saw a holographic book that had to do with the history of humans and extraterrestrial contact and our history of this on the planet kind of thing. So that'd be very interesting, a
By the
holographic
way, we have
history book.
just redesignated Solar Warden as the 10th fleet. We now have a 10th fleet.
Well, that's very
It's
interesting. though.
spacecraft.
That's interesting there. Let me see, and it's mind-blowing every time I listen to the show and listen to my guests here. John Lear also quotes Bob Lazar as saying that a small segment of the U.S. government that makes scientific and technological judgments from a knowledge base that is not available to the general public.
This is right out of Gene Huff's documentary on Bob Lazar called Excerpts from the Government Bible.
And he also quoted about how the technology was brought here by some alien beings from the Zeta Reticuli 1 and 2 star system. Talks about that, and eventually Robert left S4, and John Lear says that Bob Lazar absolutely doesn't want to talk about S4, and I guess because You had mentioned that now that he has his clearance back, it's kind of a, I don't know if it's a voluntary thing of keeping his mouth shut
Yeah.
or what have you. But the thing is too, but how Lazar felt in one of his quotes, he said that the hardware and the technology he was exposed to should be placed in the proper hands of the scientific community, and it is the right of every person on earth to know that there is physical evidence which proves that there is life elsewhere and that at least one form of life has been here. And by voluntarily keeping quiet about what he knows, he's scoring apparently contrary to what he really would prefer to do.
Now, the
or
Bob
what he says
Lazar
he would
story
prefer.
has been optioned for a major motion picture. Once again, it's, I think, the fourth or fifth time, according to Gene Huff, that it has been optioned for a major motion picture. So we may get a really good film treatment of that subject here in the near future if that deal goes through.
All righty, you know, and just a moment, I wanted to show the clip of the famous video from STS-48, and on your documentary, Richard C. Hoagland, I believe he's an astrophysicist. Is he an astrophysicist or a researcher?
He's a Jet Propulsion Laboratory physicist who sat side by side with Walter Cronkite during the Apollo missions, giving the nation insight into what we were doing as we were circling the moon or landing on the moon. He's a well-established, credible scientist, spoken at the United Nations,
Yes.
Ohio State University, throughout the world actually, and he's one of the best leading-edge scientists that we have that can really analyze the information that we see. The STS-48 tape, by the way, was originally taped when NASA was still doing live feeds by Donald Ratch. So we got to give Don Ratch credit
Yes.
for this too.
Thank you, Donald. It's a brilliant piece of film, and it's from NASA. And momentarily we will show the STS-48 clip, and it shows, and Richard's voice will be heard over the background. And there's
Now
the
pay
clip. and
attention to
watch
your
this.
screen at the top center. We'll see a dot of light appear and begin to move from right to left. Watch carefully. The dot will turn hard right in apparent response to a brief flash from the lower left. 3 seconds later, two contrails move sharply upward from the lower left.
That was a maser beam that splashed past.
That's amazing.
The satellite.
Now that shows something that there's some kind of consciousness or some kind of control in it, because it's flying along and all of a sudden the flash happens and this thing moves out of the way, changes course, and then there's something that's shot
Yeah.
at it that you
Brilliant
can see.
Pebbles is what the name of that laser type of looking weapon is that's shot out at the craft. And in Hoagland's analysis, he does a scientific analysis of that footage and determines that that object was 1,700 miles away from the
Yes,
camera.
yes.
And also that that craft moved at 14,000 Gs.
Yes.
We have nothing like that in our science that moves at 14,000
Yep.
Gs.
It was 15 miles per second or 54,000 miles an hour, and it accelerated in less than 2 seconds to over 200,000 miles per hour, or 14 Gs. We don't have anything.
14,000.
14,000 Gs? Oh, because he mentioned 4. Okay. There's nothing that we have that does that.
No.
That we know of.
No.
So,
He-
so this is
he-
possibly
That
our
was one of our
technology?
first solar warden intercepts.
Oh. So then this is our technology then, you believe?
It's
That's
our
our technology
technology.
and they're testing it? And that's what Hoagland claims, that one of his theories is that NASA film caught a so-called Star Wars weapon system using our own technology. And if we had a chance to maybe show that once again, I'd love to show it again before we goes on. It's a very fascinating clip. And it's not an asteroid, it's not swamp gas, it's something that's very consciously moving, and then it'll blink
Now
into
pay
the
attention
center.
to your
Okay,
screen
there we
at the
go.
top center. We'll see a dot of light appear and begin to move from right to left. Watch carefully. The
It's
dot will
interesting,
turn
Kyle, because
hard right
NASA, after
in
this was
apparent response
released,
to a brief
decided
flash
to cut
from the
the
lower
live
left.
feed.
No more
that's-
live feed.
3 seconds
now it
later,
only
two
shows these
contrails
A delay
move sharply
feed?
upward
Correct.
Oh,
from
so
the
they can
lower left.
censor it.
So they can censor and control it.
Now watch this thing take off. You saw the flash and oops, there it goes, out of the atmosphere. Boom! That's amazing.
Yep.
And then there were other little lit objects too that you notice the more you watch that clip. There's like other things that are
Moving around in
moving around
in that atmosphere.
Yes, and they're kind of going with the main movement on there, and they're reacting in reaction to what's going on with the main
Yeah.
function.
There are a
whatever
lot
that-
of UFO researchers that have studied the STS tapes over the last couple decades, and a lot of them have made really brilliant captures of anomalous objects out there. So there is a lot available to view in terms of the STS tapes out there if you're so interested.